3 minutes until showtime. Two minutes until showtime. One minute until showtime. Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Blog Talk Radio.
Now, from the world's most famous beach, from where beach racing began, it's the Legends of Racing radio show. Live from racing's North Turn Beach Bar and Grill in Ponce Inlet, Florida. The Legends of Racing radio show. And your host, Buzz McKim.
Wow, that's nice. You folks are easily entertained, I must say. Anyway, hey, great. Well, we're back here today at the North Turn Restaurant in Ponce Inlet, Florida, along the golden sands of Daytona Beach. And this is the Legends of Racing radio show. And I have a super duper guy here today. I cannot wait to hear stories from this fella. He worked with all the major teams back in the 60s, 70s, probably into the 80s. And he was there for a lot of the innovation in the sport, too. And I've been waiting a while to spend some time with this guy. How about a big round of applause here for Skip McCarthy? Hey.
Thank you.
I might as well start at the beginning. Where are you from originally?
Detroit.
Oh, okay. There we go. Yeah, you and Ralph Johnson, right?
Yes, I never met Ralph until I ended up down here in '75.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Dealt with him over the phone.
Oh, really?
Never met him.
You'll meet Ralph Johnson in a few weeks. He was Smokey Yunick's right-hand man for about 30 years. Another guy that's got some stories. But now, being from the Motor City, I guess it was just natural that you took an interest in automobiles, right?
I loved racing. 'cause we had a couple tracks there before Michigan. I mean, we had dirt tracks. And there's where I met because I loved racing. And we didn't get very much racing from NASCAR, very few times on the radio. But I loved Chryslers. My first engine I bought was a 413 Chrysler from John Koskalowski.
John Koskalowski.
They used to call him Dirty John.
Dirty
he ran
John.
a Chrysler 300 and Arca.
Oh, really? Oh, wow. Interesting.
And then I bought a car from Benny Parsons, number 2, which Dick Gould owned the taxi cab company.
Okay, right.
And I raced an Arca, and I was an iron worker. So I had made enough money. I went and bought one of Bud Moore's 64 Mercury Fastbacks.
Oh, my goodness, really?
Yeah. And Johnny Wynn drove.
I mean, also John Lawrence.
John Lawrence is
Yep.
his guesses.
That's right. That's right.
And his father owned a trophy company that did all this stuff for Ford Motor Company.
Trophy company.
And
Really? So
Spike Lawrence Trophy.
I'll be darned. So that means that Johnny could make his own trophies and tell everybody that. That sounds like a good
probably
idea.
would have been cheaper than racing.
Yeah, right.
But that's how I got going. And I raced the car for a year, and we totaled it.
Yeah.
And Rossi was leaving Bud Moore to go on his own. And I wasn't doing anything except working for a couple car dealerships doing engine stuff for him.
Right.
And I talked to him. I said, well, I'd like to go to work for you. He says, well, I'm just starting out, and I can't afford a lot. He says, well, so he said, how much do you need? So I went back home, and I figured out I was living in a Tower motel. And so I figured out what the rent was, how much. I said, I can work for $100 a week.
Wow. That was a bargain, huh?
It was, I guess. But I didn't care. That's what I wanted to do.
Right.
And I learned.
Yes.
He was a good
Mario
teacher.
Rossi was one of the real geniuses. I know he worked for Smokey. He actually
Yes,
did a little bit of work with Marshall Teague.
Yeah.
And then he went on to his own thing.
You're right.
Yeah. And I guess you guys were together years later when you were with Dygard, right?
Yes, that's how I ended. Yeah. Actually, I had some Hemi engines left, and I heard he was there, and I called, and he says, well, yeah, because I had some Hemi engines, and I didn't want to leave them on a trailer because things do disappear. So he said, no problem, we got 10,000 square feet out here. I said, oh, great.
Yeah.
He says, do you know anybody? We're looking for an engine man.
Oh.
I'm sitting there, and it's snowing out.
Yeah.
I was in Detroit. And he said, I said, well, how much does it pay? So he told me how much. I thought to myself, that's not bad. I said, when do you need this guy? He said, well, I could use him tomorrow. I said, I can be there in a week.
Nice.
So I said, okay. I called my brother. I said, I'm giving you power of attorney, sell my house, everything, I'm out of here. I've been here ever since.
Just like that. Amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but I
so-
loved racing.
And you haven't shoveled snow since, right?
Me.
Yeah.
I've had a wonderful career in racing. Did IndyCar.
Really?
With McLaren.
Oh, wow.
Did offshore racing with Ale House. Did sports cars with John Green.
Is
who was
that
the engine
right?
builder there.
I'll be darned. Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. So you know, I think most folks recognize you for your NASCAR career, but you're really very, very diverse, aren't you?
Yes. Yeah. It was. Well, you know how things change around and stuff.
Right. Right. Now, when I was a kid, I remember that story about Johnny Wynn, where he had taken that Bud Moore Mercury and he set it on the pole for the ARCA race. But he what was the story? What happened then?
Well, he decided this. Danny Bird was his name.
Yeah.
And he had worked on that 100,000-mile Mercury Comet run.
Right.
So he said, well, I think he could do a better job, and I'm, you know, because he hadn't raced that much on super speedways. So, you know, it's, well, okay. So he went and talked to Darrell Derringer. And Darrell told him the setup he used, which loosened the car right up. And he went out there, and on the second lap of practice, rolled it. Totaled the car.
And it was already on the pole.
Yep.
Not good.
Yep.
Yeah.
But I did go back and buy the second one.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's good. I bet you wish you had that car now, huh?
Yeah. Either one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, those were, they amazed me. They were chopped and channeled.
Were they really?
Yes, I went, because we tore up a front fender, and I went to the junkyard and got a '64 Mercury front fender, and it was about 4 inches too tall.
Oh, my. How about that?
Went to change the windshield in it. It was an inch too tall.
I'll be darned.
So back then, they did a lot of that.
Yeah, is that a little, well, that's what you call creative rule interpretation, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I learned in racing, I think we spent more time figuring out how to interpret the rule book to our favor.
Yeah, there you
Which is
go.
a nice way of saying we were cheating.
Yeah. Did you ever get caught?
Yep. No, actually, the only time we didn't get caught, except NASCAR told us when Donnie was driving for us with Dygaard, that if we didn't tell them where the nitrous oxide bottle was, they were going to cut the car in little pieces.
Whoa.
Which
Nitrous. You wouldn't do that, would you?
Oh, nitrous is light, so it makes the race car lighter.
I see. Okay.
Doesn't give you any more horsepower.
No, of course not.
But we, instead of using a bottle, we incorporated it into roll bars.
Oh, slick. Very nice.
And 35 thousandths orifice was 100 horsepower.
Really?
Yeah,
That's phenomenal. That thing would be a rocket ship.
it was, down the backstretch. You couldn't run it all the time or you'd just slide up the racetrack and into the fence.
Now, was that when Donnie sat on the pole?
Well, I can't remember that exactly.
Oh, okay. All righty. I guess.
Probably might have had something to do with it.
A little selective memory there, you know?
Yeah.
Yes, but that nitrous, that was pretty cool stuff, wasn't it?
Yeah. And Smokey had used it years before.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I'll be darned.
And a lot of times, looking back, I think a lot of the cars did, but they were, as I remember one race at Talladega. I forget who was in front, but Richard was like 2 or 3 laps, David Pearson was 2 or 3 laps behind. And in 5 laps, he caught up. Of course, there was a caution in there,
Right.
and he won the race.
Oh, my.
So I said to myself, David never sandbagged. He was pretty steady all the time.
Right.
And I thought, he's got to have something in there that ain't right.
Oh, that's like that one time at Talladega. Marty Robbins, the country music star, he was running exceptionally well, and he had something kind of trick in the car that wasn't caught during inspection.
I know what it was.
Oh, okay.
V.V. Alvarez.
Oh, really?
It was lifted the carburetor up to get that extra air in there.
Oh, son of a gun. Okay, all right. That was another smart man, Mr.
Yeah,
Alvarez.
it was, yeah.
Well, the deal was that Richard Petty, after the race, Marty went to the inspectors and he said, I can't take the points, I can't take the money, I got to come clean. He said, we're running illegal, but all my life, all I ever wanted to do was pass Richard Petty. So
Yeah.
I did, so I'm coming clean. So he got to pass Richard Petty. Some folks are just motivated by different things, right? Yeah.
Well, he was a nice, because I supplied parts for him because, they called me up. I had certain rear ends they needed from H.B. Rainier.
Oh, really?
I also took care of his cars.
Wow.
Charlie drove for us.
Charlie Glotzbeck?
Yeah.
Whoa, I'll
Yeah.
be darned. Yeah, of course, Harry Ranier, he was a great car owner. Cal
Yeah.
Yarborough drove for him. Buddy Baker won the
Yeah.
Daytona 500 for him. His son, Lauren Ranier, now works for Ganassi, and it's just a great, great family. They've been
Yeah.
around a long time.
Yeah, H.B. was a great guy. He was.
Yeah. So, and his father actually owned a car that ran in the 1950 or 51 Southern 500 and finished very well. The guy that drove for him was a fellow named Johnny Patterson, and Johnny ended up later on coming to work for Smokey back in the 60s.
Well, that's funny. H.B., but he had coal mines.
Yeah. Well, he was doing okay. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, Kentucky.
Prestonburg, Kentucky.
There you go. That's right. Him and Farrell Harris. Remember Farrell?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was another coal miner. That's something. Yeah, the guys out of Kentucky were coal miners. The guys out of North Carolina usually were sawmill owners.
Yeah.
Or tobacco farmers or something like that. Or
Well, that-
moonshiners.
Well, that's like Curtis Turner. He bought and sold lumber.
That's right. Yeah, he certainly did. Millions
Yeah.
at a time. He I don't know how many $1 million fortunes he lost over the years.
Yeah.
He's a pretty incredible guy, that's for sure. Yeah. Well, yeah, I got to find out more about your IndyCar deal. That's really fascinating. We'll be coming back here to that in just about a minute or so. We're going to be breaking, so be prepared for a wide and diverse conversation here about racing. So, did you ever actually work for the Bud Moore team?
No, I didn't.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
But I knew them. We all knew each other because
Yeah.
it was right there. I mean, Cotton, everybody.
Yeah.
And my father-in-law owned a junkyard right next to Cotton.
Oh,
and
boy.
the dealership and everything. So, and I worked for Cotton for 6 months.
Okay, that was a smart man too.
Yep.
Yeah.
And his brother, Ralph, would built the motors.
Oh, okay.
Was the engine guy. I worked with him.
Yeah. Yeah, these guys are just country boys, and they just had this incredible innate ability to make cars run fast and to make them handle well, and they didn't go to school for it. You know, the whole bunch of them, you know, Smokey and Ralph Moody and Cotton and Bud Moore, they were just brilliant natural engineers, and they just knew what it took to make things run extremely well. We're going to take a break here for just a second. We'll be right back.
The caution flag is out. Time for a break. We'll be right back with the Legends of Racing radio show. Welcome to Homewood Suites by Hilton in Daytona Beach. You're right in the middle of all the action. Daytona International Speedway, the airport, One Daytona, Florida's newest entertainment and retail destination, and of course, the world's most famous beach. You'll love our newly remodeled 1- and 2-bedroom suites, along with our popular King Studios. You won't need your full kitchen, as Homewood Suites Daytona serves up complimentary breakfast and evening social. It's like home away from home. Go to HomewoodDaytona.com for Homewood Suites by Hilton in Daytona Beach. We're back from where it all began, racing's original North Turn Beach Bar and Grill. The Legends of Racing radio show continues with your host, Buzz McKim.
Thank you. And my good friend Skip McCarthy, we're kind of going down memory lane here. It's so neat to talk to guys who came from the golden era of the sport that had firsthand experience, firsthand knowledge. You know, little things like just getting to the track before the interstates. That must have been a nightmare, wasn't it?
Well, when I was in Spartanburg with Rossi and there was only 5 of us that took care of the car.
Is that right?
Yeah. Built the motors, chassis. I worked on the chassis as far as fitting up the wheel bearings and everything. And back then, a crew chief could do anything on that car. He could rebuild a transmission, a rear end, an engine, everything. Nowadays, you have 50 specialists.
That's right.
Making 5 times more money than I did back then. But it was, and when we got done, we loaded up and went to the racetrack. There was sometimes we drove 24 hours straight through. Wow. I mean, it was, but we all loved it.
Yeah.
It was fun.
You were not in it for the money, were you?
No, you know, and that's funny. Like I said, started out with $100 a week, and then just kept moving up, and then I got a percentage of what the car made.
Wow, that's nice.
Which I bought all my Snap-on tools with.
So you just put it right back into the business,
Yeah.
basically. Yeah. Did you ever think about owning your own team?
Well, when I had that chance with Rainier, HB, and at the time Cole was down, and he said, because he had the 69 Super B, which is the one that had that grill.
Right. Yeah.
And 1 year only.
Yeah, Bobby Watson?
Now, Watson drove Throman Arca.
Oh, okay. Right.
And yes, and he flew me up there because he had a twin engine and flew down through the mountains. That was the first time I ever landed on an airport in between the 2 mountains.
Oh, gee.
And then we went on a tour and how they coal mined and everything in his shop. And he says, well, right now things aren't very good. He says, but you can take the cars back to Spartanburg and you can race them, but I can't supply you with any money. So I did. And B.V. Alvarez helped me.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah.
And Rossi used to, because I was building his engines at the time too, in my own shop.
Yeah.
And I had to laugh. So we were at Atlanta, and I think we finished 7th. And Rossi finished 2 ahead of me, and he says, I don't know how you made any money. He says, because the tire bill is more than what you made. And I didn't tell him Charlie had a deal with Goodyear. We didn't pay anything for the tires.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So that was Charlie Glassbeck.
Yes.
Yeah, Charlie Glassbeck was your driver. Charging Charlie
Charging
Glassbeck.
Charlie.
Gotta love Charlie.
I loved him because he was the old-time racer. He didn't put up. I can remember at Charlotte when he chased Buddy Baker all around the racetrack. And Chrysler came down and said, you got to do something with him. He's going to wreck both cars.
It's called racing, folks.
Yeah, what are you going to do? You ain't going to tell the driver slow down.
Oh, man.
But those were the days where they raced.
Yeah, that's right.
And bumped and everything.
Now, Rossi, who did Rossi have as a driver back then? Was Bobby driving for him?
Yes.
Bobby Allison.
Yes, Bobby Allison.
Yep.
When first driver in '68, we got to deal with. Well, before that, we had to deal with John Thorne.
Hey, now there's an interesting cat right there.
Yes,
Yeah.
he was, and that was the first '66 Dodge Charger,
Leroy.
purple, and Leroy.
Yeah,
Leroy drove.
And that's one of the prettiest race cars there has ever been,
Yeah,
in my opinion.
yeah, and I think that was the number 12. And then we got to deal with Chrysler with the '68 Plymouth Roadrunner and Darrell Derringer.
Okay. Yep.
Then '69 is when Bobby came aboard. And then we really did that one year. I guess we had like 8 or 9 seconds.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, my.
Yeah, it was one of those, bridesmaid years. Like,
Yeah.
And then we started winning races.
Yeah.
And then Bobby went out on his own. Well, Chrysler, that was, the car companies got out.
Yeah. Yeah, now, when Bobby was here, you told a really interesting story about the color of that race car.
Oh, yes.
Yep.
Originally, because the Plymouth was blue and gold.
Right.
They never said nothing about that. But when we went to Dodge, we had the same blue and gold color. Blue on the bottom and gold on the top. And Chrysler came to us and said, you can't recognize the car on the speedway. So that's when we changed the color to red.
Amazing.
Red and gold.
Yeah. It's something as simple as that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Bobby was known for that red and gold combination forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it all came about by almost by accident, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, actually, we came up with the gold from Smokey.
Okay. Right.
Because that was he gave us some of the, it wasn't paint.
Yeah.
You used clear with a gold flake stuff. And that was your base coat, and then we cleared over that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that's how we ended up, and that's how we ended up with the number 22.
Is that right?
Well, that was Smokey's number.
Okay. Alrighty.
And most people don't realize the car owner owns the number, not the driver.
That's exactly
So
right.
to get that number, we had to go to Smokey, and he gave it to Rossi because Rossi had worked for him.
Yep.
So-
And Smokey was running the number 22 back when Fireball drove for him. Fireball loved the number 22. He ran it forever because his, you all might have heard this before, I don't know, but his idol was Red Byron, the first NASCAR champion, who always ran number 22. And the reason Red Byron ran the number 22 is because his car builder, Red Vogt, was born on September 22nd. That's how the 22 came down through the decades. How about that stuff?
Interesting. Yeah. Was Red Volt in Atlanta?
He was in Atlanta in the early days, and he moved to Daytona in
In
the
the with Flatheads?
Yes.
Now, my father-in-law that had the dealership and junkyard in Spartanburg sponsored him because he said he paid for Red Volt built engines too. Didn't he? 'Cause
yes.
I forget who he sponsored, but he got a he knew him and got an engine from Red Volt.
I'll
to
be
race.
darned. How about that? Yeah, Red was the king of the Flatheads.
Yeah.
And he worked under contract with Raymond Parks, who was the multimillionaire Atlanta moonshine guy, and the guy who really foot the bill for NASCAR in the early days until NASCAR could stand on its own. So between the Red Byron, Red Vogt, Red Raymond Park's Triumvirate, they absolutely dominated the first couple of years of racing. It's pretty incredible. That's for sure. Now, you guys were great innovators too, though, weren't you?
Well, yes, we invented gluing the lug nuts on.
There you go. Yeah.
That's how we won the pit crew contest in '69.
That's got to be one of the most simple but most brilliant ideas ever.
Yeah.
Now, being an old pit man, did you have to carry the lugs in your mouth like so many guys do?
Well, we used to take safety wire. Yeah. Now, we sometimes, because the Hemi had that, the way it was, you had those spark plug hoses.
Yeah, right.
We used to take that and bite it and put 2 lug nuts on. But then we started using wire, safety wire, and making a thing, the same thing, and spreading it apart where you could just grab them.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, when that guy's hitting that lug wrench and those things are flying off and he gets a tire off and throws the other one on, and you have to stick those lug nuts on while he's wham, 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 with 150 pounds pressure on the air pressure, which is nitrogen, on the air wrenches. And those were special sockets that they were tapered and everything else, and they had a spring in the center. And if you had your finger in there, it'd probably cut it off.
Oh my!
So you had to be quick and work around them and everything. It wasn't easy.
Yeah, the pit man, that was one of the more dangerous jobs other than driving, wasn't it?
Well, but what's really funny, in all the years I did that, only once did I come close to where we could have been hurt. And Richard lost it coming in, and because that was with Donnie in a fair lane, and hit the back of the car. And I had the car up, and I was, all of a sudden, the jack's turning over, and several chunks of Bondo fly by me.
Whoa.
And I'm thinking, geez, what's going on? And I looked around, and I seen what was going on. And he backed up and went down and parked his race car and came down to our pit to make sure we were all okay.
Is that right?
Yes.
Wow.
I couldn't believe that.
That is really something.
Well,
that's incredible.
But nobody was hurt. We just lucky.
Yeah. But there have been some pretty bad deals over the years.
Talladega, when one of Petty's, that was a pit crew accident, but no car hit him. Yeah. That was the one where we used to take a water heater tank and put the water in it and pressurize it, and that way we could quick fill the radiators if you were overheating. And what happened, he picked up the air hose from the tank that fed the air wrenches, which, like I said, 150 pounds. Plugged that into the tank, and it blew the tank up and, instantly killed him. Yeah,
that was Richard's brother-in-law, Randy Owens. Yeah. It's so sad.
Yeah.
But, anytime you're involved in the sport, even as spectators, you're really taking a risk.
Yeah.
There have been times when spectators didn't come home. And but if you love it, you're willing to take that chance. And the odds of it happening to you are pretty darn slim. But you have to. I remember all the time we were growing up, my dad always said, never turn your back on a race car. If you're walking in front of the stands, you walk backwards, because that race car can go anywhere. Yeah. And we've seen them go just about anywhere, that's for sure. I think it's about as safe as you can possibly get it today. But, who wants to take a chance, right? Well, we're going to take a real quick break here. We'll be right back with more from our friend Skip McCarthy.
The caution flag is out. Time for a break. We'll be right back with the Legends of Racing radio show. Racing's original North Turn is our broadcast headquarters. If you're looking for a good drink, great entertainment, and the best in food, they're right on the beach at Racing's original North Turn. Rhonda and Walt invite you to come on down to dinner tonight. Here are a couple of testimonials. These are actual testimonials from people who have enjoyed the North Turn. Been there many times, always great food and drinks, great location on the beach. And another, what a great experience. It's my new favorite restaurant in the Daytona Beach area, Racing's Original North Turn on South Atlantic Avenue. That's A1A in Ponce Inlet, about 3.2 miles south of the Dunlawton Bridge and A1A intersection. It's Racing's Original North Turn, a restaurant, museum, bar, gift shop, live music. That's Racing's North Turn. Racing's North Turn has been voted by you top 10 beach bar 7 years in a row. Next year, they're going for top 5. We're back from where it all began, racing's original North Turn Beach Bar and Grill. The Legends of Racing radio show continues with your host, Buzz McKim.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. Yeah, drink up. You're doing a fine job. That's great. So, another thing about the old pit stops, back before they had the dry brake fuel systems, you had a regular gas cap with a lanyard, like a piece of wire that was hooked to the car, and you'd flip that gas cap open and put the gas in and put the gas cap back on, and more than one guy lost a finger by getting his finger caught in that wire and popping that baby right off, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It was a lot different. And you had more fires.
Oh, yes.
Because if the gas spilled down and hit the rear drum brakes that were cherry red, poof.
Yeah.
And remember that one time in Charlotte, I think Ray Fox's car
Oh, yes.
caught on fire.
Yeah,
that one
big
time
fire, that's for sure.
And lucky more people weren't burned bad or anything, but it was dangerous.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Well, looking back on innovation, I'm thinking about a guy named Pete Peterson. Might have mentioned this in an earlier show, but I just thought it was brilliant. It was something that this guy tried, but you'll find out how it didn't work. But anyway, in 1956, they ran the very first convertible race on the beach. And Pete Peterson was an auto air conditioning salesman from Chicago. And thinking about today, how nice air conditioning would be, he decided he was going to run that race in a 56 Ford with the roof up and the windows up and his air conditioning system working. And he started last, which was about 29th. He finished in the top 10. But he predicted that by the end of the season, most every race car in the country would have an air conditioner in it. And to this day, that is the only car that ever had an air conditioner in it. But he tried, right? I imagine there were some things that you guys tried.
Well, yes, we tried a lot of different things, but they all didn't work. Sometimes what worked on the dyno, horsepower-wise, at the racetrack, they didn't. So it was very hard to relate certain things. But we didn't have computers and stuff that would track everything like they do now.
Yeah.
Chrysler back then got into doing that, and that's how they would give us a setup for all of the different tracks, the starters setup, where they'd go like to the middle of the track and do all the way around, and they'd come up with the torsion bars and springs and setup.
Really?
And that was Larry Rathke.
Oh, sure.
He designed all of the Chrysler race cars from Nichols.
And he did the great Dodge Daytona and
Yep.
Plymouth Superbird.
Yep.
Larry's still around.
Yes.
He's still alive.
Yes. But it was really interesting, but that was, they were just starting to really dabble in aerodynamics and everything and get going.
Right.
It was, because back then we didn't get disc brakes until, 71 or 2 or 3. We were running drum brakes because Chrysler had a guy, his name was Charlie. Charlie No Brakes.
Charlie No Brakes.
Well, when we were testing, we won't see how they would work out a short track because that's where the real problem was, like Martinsville and stuff.
Yeah.
And so we'd be testing, and we had the different paints we stuck on there to tell you what temperatures they were running. And I had to laugh, so we get over looking, Charlie, no brakes, they're all worn out.
So he wasn't doing a very good job, was he?
Well, back then you had to run regular drum brakes and everything, even though they did have. And I remember we had stainless steel brake shoes.
Wow.
And we spent a ton of time drilling the backing plates out and running hoses and everything to, blow the dust out because they were ceramic. But Bobby Allison was one of the best short track drivers. When he started driving for us with the Dodges, like at Martinsville, we had brakes left at the end of the race.
Really?
He was just very good
That's an art.
of how to throw the car and use the tires a little more to slow you down in a corner.
Isn't that something?
But he was easy on equipment,
Yeah.
which helped.
What a pro. Yeah, he's the kind of guy that could take a 10th place car and win with it. He's just remarkable. Very few people could do what he did with a race car. Now, when did you get involved with DieGuard? How did that all come about?
Well, that came about with Rossi, like I said. I have couple, 3 Hemi engines left, and that was in '75. And so I called down there. I heard he was the head of the operation. So I said, well, I got a couple, 3 engines, Hemi engines I want to sell. And ARCA back then was still running Hemi engines. So I figured, well, I got no use for them. Wish I'd have kept them all.
Yeah.
But, so that's how I ended up there. I called him, and he said, oh, yeah, we got plenty of room. But then he asked me, he says, hey, we're looking for an engine man. You know anybody? So at that time, I'm looking out the window, and it's snowing
Oh, yeah.
in Detroit.
Yeah.
Cold. And I said, well, how much does that job pay? And he told me, and I thought to myself, that ain't bad. I said, how soon do you need this guy? He said, I could use him tomorrow. I said, I can be there in a week. He said, okay, you got the job. So I called my brother, which he lived in Michigan too, and I said, I'm going to give you power of attorney, sell my house, I'm leaving. And he did, and I've been here ever since.
And that's when Dygard was in Daytona, right?
Yeah. On Fentress Boulevard.
Yeah,
Yes.
and the building's still there. And I bet you had never seen a shop like that before.
No, that was huge.
Yes. Yeah, this shop had everything that a modern shop has today, and this is back in the mid-'70s. No one had ever seen anything like this before. I know I used to do artwork for the team back in the day, and I walked into the first day, and it was like going into Disney World almost. It was phenomenal, big, huge, hydraulic jacks, a floor you could eat off of, a conference room, all this kind of stuff. Yeah.
Well, you know, that's funny. Bud Moore had a beautiful shop, half that size.
That's right.
Same thing with Cotton.
Yeah.
Half that size. Yeah. There was no really, and that's funny. Holman and Moody was just a conglomerate of old buildings.
Yeah, nothing special.
No,
Yeah,
not like today.
Lenny Pond, the year he won Rookie of the Year in, I think, 74, 75, maybe a little earlier, he worked out of a one-car garage, and he had one car to run. So, I mean, you guys were like, you know, a mega team back then, weren't you?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that.
Well, how about the warm and cuddly Gardner brothers? How were they to work for?
Well, the one with the money, he wasn't here that much.
Okay.
Now, his brother kind of ran the operation.
Yeah.
Back then, that's when the money was starting to come in. And it just, I don't know. It wasn't like it used to be. It got more into backstabbing and, well, you know, it's the jack man's fault or the engine man or tire guy or somebody.
Right.
You know, it was just not. Yeah. And I was already, Smokey had me, because we had a deal with Smokey that any machine work we needed to do, I could go over there and use the shop.
All right.
So Smokey said, well, heck, I give you, come over and work 4 hours a night for me if you want. So I had done that too, because I didn't have to go to the races anymore.
Oh, that's
I just did engine work.
You didn't miss that too much, did you? Traveling and all that?
Well, at least even back then I got to where I got to fly.
Oh, very nice.
You know, so yeah, that was nice.
Yeah.
Before, no.
Yeah.
So it was all right, but it just, and the Gardners were, they didn't know what they wanted. Then they got into, you know, that's funny. So Donnie left, which was a bad scene.
Yes, that was terrible.
And I don't know, it probably wasn't really done right. And then Darrell came aboard. And Darrell, he got his name Jaws. He earned them.
You had first-hand experience there, huh?
Well, yeah, well, Kenny Trout.
Oh, yeah.
And several of them that worked for him, they all just quit.
Did they really?
Yeah, and it was bad. And there's a funny thing, and then they decided to move to Charlotte. And when that all took place, that was the end of, well, I was already eliminated a month or so before, but I had a job with Smokey, so I didn't care.
Yeah.
But then when they decided to move everything to Charlotte, that's when Kenny and several of them said, well, they had promised them things, but they never followed through, so it was a cutthroat deal. Then actually, basically, you might as well say Darrell wanted everything moved there, which I could understand to a point because it became the racing hub, Charlotte.
Sure.
But then, and they won a lot, but then something must have really gone sour on that whole deal. Because then the next thing, because I knew, he had raced early when I first got involved in NASCAR. He went up to all the different racetracks because he'd worked for Banjo and sold parts.
It wasn't Bill Seifert, was it?
Yes.
Bill Seifert.
Bill Seifert.
Right.
And he said, when Dygart went out of business, they owed a bunch of money to everybody.
Wow, no kidding.
So,
I'll be darned.
well, the brother with all the money made it in precious metals. In other words, titanium and all that stuff.
Right.
Because stop and think about it, there were still wars going on.
Yeah.
And there's where he kind of was smart enough. He kind of cornered the market, you might say.
Yes. Well, and he was the largest supplier of surgical stainless steel.
Yeah.
He made a fortune in that.
Yeah.
And his plan was to come to Daytona, set up the race shop over here on Fentress,
Yeah.
and he wanted to make Daytona the hub of racing. Well, it all sounded well and good, but you were 8 hours from any other racetrack. And everybody said, you're nuts. Yeah. So after a couple of years, he realized that it probably wasn't a very good idea. And then everybody ended up, making Charlotte the hub anyway because of its central location.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense.
Sure.
And there's why everybody's got 100,000 square foot shops.
Yeah. Garage mahals.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah. Could you ever imagine what it has become?
I would have never believed the amount of money it takes and the amount of money that's involved.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got old entry forms like, if you won Daytona, you won like $8,000 or $9,000.
Wow. That's insane, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. But at the time, it seemed like a good idea.
Yeah, but a bonus year, if you won a lot of races back then, if you won $100,000 in a year, now you got to remember the driver got 30, 40, or 50%, depending on how good he was.
Yeah.
So as an owner, that doesn't leave a lot unless you had some sponsors.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's all proportionate. And, of course, sponsorship was a song back then. I mean, you weren't making a whole lot of money. No. I remember Bud Moore in 1974. He was making, he had RC Cola as a sponsor, and he was getting paid $10,000 a race. So that means that for a 36-race season, he was making $360,000. And that won't even cover half your tire bill now. Yeah.
Well, with Chrysler, we got $5,000 a race.
Wow.
And we had to make the race.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, you don't get paid.
No.
You don't eat.
And then if we could pick up a sponsor for the quarter panel, like a Northwest Dodge or somebody, and wherever, what track for 500.
Right.
That was how we did it.
Isn't that amazing? We're going to take another real quick break, and we'll be right back with more cool stuff.
The caution flag is out. Time for a break. We'll be right back with the Legends of Racing radio show. At Beach Boys Embroidery and Tees, it's all about making you happy. Beach Boys Embroidery can customize your athletic golf apparel, caps, hats, badges, buttons, magnets, backpacks, bags, totes, clocks, watches, and of course, T-shirts. Sure, they're at 2033 South Ridgewood Avenue in South Daytona, and they're waiting for you to call now. 386-255-5880. Beach Boys Embroidery and Tees. We're back from where it all began, racing's original North Turn Beach Bar and Grill. The Legends of Racing radio show continues with your host, Buzz McKim.
Thank you, folks. Way too kind. You might have been noticing this picture in the back here with this archaic old race car. That's Frank Lockhart. Frank Lockhart won the Indy 500 as a rookie. He was a dirt track guy, set 140 records in one day at a race in Ohio. He was brilliant, could barely read and write, but he was a mechanical genius. He designed this car, the Stutz Blackhawk, which was sponsored by the Stutz Motor Company. Even today, it's considered one of the most mechanically perfect cars ever designed. He was the first guy to do flush rivets on the, everybody thinks it was Howard Hughes in aviation. Several years before then, Frank Lockhart came up with the idea of flush rivets on the sheet metal, aerodynamic purposes. You notice there's no radiator on the car. He cooled the engine with blocks of dry ice. He didn't want that blunt nose. Even the front axle was tapered for an aerodynamic feel. Sir Malcolm Campbell told him every time you make a run on the beach, he came to Daytona in 1928 trying to break the world speed record. Very light, very, very nimble car. He said, you got to change your tires after every run. Well, on one of the runs, old Frank came south, got down here to the inlet, didn't really have the money to get the good tires, but he got these tires for free. So they spun the car around. He had to get back up the beach within an hour, and it would have taken forever to pull those wheel skirts off. Well, on the way down, he picked up a clamshell and didn't know it. And on the way up, as he got to right about where the pier is, that tire blew. And that car tumbled and disintegrated, and he landed at his wife's feet, and he died. He was only 25 years old. But he was an absolute mechanical genius. He was the idol of Mickey Thompson, Steve Meal. A lot of your real mechanical geniuses look to him as the guru. To show you, poor old Frank, he was tough to live with, evidently. The racing community took up a collection to send his body back to California, and they gave his wife the money. And a couple days later, somebody realized that he was still laying at the funeral home because his wife had taken the money and took off. And you talk about the Rodney Dangerfield of racing, man, he got no respect, you know. So anyway, they had to take up another collection and ship him home. But Frank is phenomenal. I mean, only 25 years old, but he's one of the real gods of racing. Speaking of gods of racing, how about Robert G? Did you work with Robert G?
Yes.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
very good.
They say he was the Michelangelo of race car fabricators, right?
He was good.
Yeah.
He could make anything.
Yeah, just an old country boy.
Yeah, that's really funny. Working with Indy, the guys in England, they all knew how to make sheet metal. Take a flat piece of aluminum, beat it, and work it, and make a fender or whatever.
Right.
I think one guy was Luigi.
Oh, Luigi Lazowski. He was a genius.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
He did a lot of work for Smokey.
Yes. Because that's the old, that's old world trade.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, and Robert did it just by plain old common sense. Yeah. He's Dale Jr.'s grandfather, as a matter of fact. And there's a real famous story. In fact, it was even in Car and Driver magazine about Robert G. He was always coming up with some kind of crazy thing. But anyway, Jim Gardner, he was kind of a tyrannical sometimes, you know. Yeah. And this one Monday morning meeting he was having, he gathered the entire team, and he's just hellfire and brimstone about something that happened over the weekend. And, okay, anybody got any questions? And old Robert, he raised his hand. He said, yeah, what do you want? He says, what you going to do about the commode? And James says, what about the commode? He said, well, he says, you're either going to have to raise the seat or lower the water, because every time I go in there to do my business, my gonads get wet. That was the end of the meeting. That sounds like him, doesn't it?
Yeah. Of course.
I had to clean it up a little bit, too.
Depends on the depth of the water, too.
Yes. But now, an aspect of your career that I didn't know about was your years with McLaren. How did that all come about? That's fascinating.
With what?
McLaren?
McLaren? Uh-huh. Well, actually, I ended up going to work for them because I was working with Greenwood, and that deal was coming to an end, and I knew... Jim Diamond Pistons.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
And so he called up and he says, you need to go over to McLaren's. They'll hire you. So I went over there and went to work for them.
No kidding.
And that was really interesting. I never worked, and they put me in charge of the Formula 5 project, Flow 5000.
Okay.
And so I thought, oh, what's this? And he says, well, call these companies up, get camshafts, get all this stuff you need to do this and that. And I said, well, how much money should I spend or what? He said, don't worry about that.
Really? That's
so
nice.
Here I am calling all these camshafts to get camshafts and roller, everything, stuff. And stuff is not cheap. I couldn't believe it. All that stuff came in and they just sent it all in gave it to us.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
And And money was, that's the first time I ever worked anywhere where money was no object.
It's pretty rare in
Yeah.
racing.
But then I finally got to know the one guy real well, and he says, well, you don't realize how much money they pay for R&D.
Wow.
Because it was General Motors.
Is that
Hey,
right?
yeah.
Wow.
And
How about
so
that?
it was really interesting because I was, so they had me build some motors, and they couldn't believe, because the one guy, I can't remember, he wasn't too easy to work with,
Yeah.
but he had worked for Hall.
It wasn't Teddy Mayer, was it?
No,
No.
Teddy Mayer was the guy that ran.
Oh, yeah, okay. He was the big
Yes, he was-
cheese.
Yeah, he was short.
Okay,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that was Teddy.
Uh-huh.
He was the owner, whatever you'd like to call it. But
Yeah.
no, I can't think of that guy's name. They did an article on Hot Rod or something on him. But at any rate, it was the only time, because I built a whole motor and they ran it and everything. And then we had, back then they had, you could put the little scope down in and look at the walls and everything. And they couldn't believe it. He says, only any time anybody built an engine for us where everything looked brand new afterwards.
Well, that's
And they couldn't understand. I says, well, when you gap the rings, it leaves a sharp edge. I deburred everything.
really
And so there was no scratches or nothing.
Yep.
So,
just attention to detail.
yes. Well, and Rossi taught me that.
Uh-huh.
You know, so he was a very good teacher on that because I learned how to use micrometers. And the micrometers were the old style thimble type and everything. And you learned how to do it, and then the feel when you had the engine together where you could move the rod and tell how much clearance you really had.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it was a very good
Yep.
learning. And McLaren was, because there's where I learned how they built motors. They just mic'd everything and added up everything to the top of the deck, this, that, and the other, and sent it over to Diamond to do all the machine work and just give them numbers. Where I was used to, we put the motor together, mic'd the deck, and this, that, and the other, then sent it all out.
Yeah.
They just mic'd the ends of it, this, that, and the other, and said, well, the rods are XX and the pistons are this, that, and the other, and that's what we do.
It was a whole new world for you, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
it was another, where it stepped
Amazing.
up, where it was really, you know, interesting. And then working on the offies. That was another thing, because the block and the head were one piece.
Yeah.
So you had to have this valve grinder that had a big, long snake thing on it, and down in there and grind them, and you looked at how many amps it was drawing to see if you were cutting and everything.
Oh, man.
And then the crank had its own separate case. And then when you put them together, you had to heat that block up to a certain thing where it felt down in there.
Really?
And then the crank was the same way, but you put the crank in first. You stood it up on end, heated it, got it to a certain temperature, and then slid the crank in because the caps and everything were on and went through. And then
Holy cow.
once it neutralized, it was there.
That's amazing.
But it was
Amazing.
learning a lot of that stuff. And there's where you learn, too, how to get certain, heat certain, because every metal has a different expansion rate.
Right.
Stainless steel was double of cast iron. So you learned when you were fitting up wheel bearings and stuff, that you had to run, because we had steel hubs.
Yeah.
So you had to fit them.
Amazing. It's a
And
science.
how much clearance you had in there
Yeah.
and stuff, so they wouldn't seize up or spin a bearing.
We're going to take one more quick break here, folks. And here comes the sign guy right here. Go for it.
The caution flag is out. Time for a break. We'll be right back with the Legends of Racing radio show. Welcome to the Janet Hale Foundation website. With this website, we hope to broaden our reach, to find someone like you to help us on our journey. Janet's journey started 40 years ago to ensure that all children had a toy under the tree at Christmas. Today, thousands of toys and clothing are donated for underprivileged kids. We need your help to continue our journey. Tour this website and find the Donate Now button. A small gesture can make a big difference in a young life. We need your help. Visit us on Facebook, Janet Hale Foundation, or call 386-256-0752. We're back from where it all began, racing's original North Turn Beach Bar and Grill. The Legends of Racing radio show continues with your host, Buzz McKim.
Thank you very much, folks, for coming around for the white flag. Hard to believe it's gone so quick, but, when it comes down to, the physics of an engine are the same no matter what the engine is. And I would seem to think that the physics of chassis geometry are the same no matter what, right? I mean, what do you think?
There are some variables in an engine, especially. Certain engines always perform better than others. And a lot of it seemed to me to come down to, I could build an engine and it would run and take it all apart and everything looked brand new. I could change valves, springs, bearings, everything. And that engine always was like that. The minute, and I would build every engine identical. And some engines just outperformed the others. And I came down to where I'd even change cylinder heads, crankshafts, or this, that, and the other. It was always seemed to be the cylinder block.
Really? The block?
Yeah.
Huh. That was the difference.
Well, that's the only thing I could come up with. If you go back to the old days, when they raced like Smokey with the Hudsons and everything, when they cast that stuff, because they were up in Michigan,
right?
Not Smokey, but Packard in Ohio, and they just let that casting set outside in the weather for a year.
Yeah.
So they got hot, cold, everything. Sure. Nowadays they do that with cryogenics.
Oh, okay, right.
They freeze them.
Yep.
Super sub-zero.
Yeah.
And then slowly bring them back up, and they'll do that a couple times, and it seems to de-stress. Of course, all that technology actually came from space.
Is that right?
Well, because of the, I don't know how cold it is really in space, but it's way down, way cold. So
Yeah.
apparently they were doing that on your shuttles and on your manned missions and stuff. So a lot of it comes from the space program over the years.
Amazing.
Oils, everything.
Yeah, duct tape.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. What do we do with that duct tape?
Yeah.
Yeah, the government at work.
But don't forget pop rivets.
Oh, that's right. There you go.
We went from sheet metal screws in the race cars to pop rivets.
Pop rivets.
Yep.
Man, the world spins on pop rivets. That's for sure.
And great tape. Yeah.
Well, who was driving for McLaren back when you were working for them?
Johnny Rutherford.
Oh boy.
And the heir to Revlon.
Oh,
Peter
Peter
Revson.
Revson, right.
Peter Revson.
Right.
Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of heirs, you were talking about John Thorne that
Yes.
owned that car that Leroy Yarborough drove. Well, his father, Joel Thorne,
Yes.
was a little rich kid. His parents had passed away and left him a bundle of money. I heard it was maybe through railroads or something. Big, tall guy. He and Bill France hit it right off. Bill France was one of his crew members back in the late 30s into the 40s. And Joel Thorne, he drove a bit and a little eccentric, a little crazy, actually. He actually tried to buy every car in the Indy 500 field one year, so he was guaranteed a winner of the Indy 500, and AAA said, no, you can't do that. Can't do that. But anyway, John inherited the money. He worked out of Valdosta, Georgia, I believe.
Yes.
And he died early on, too, unfortunately, as his father did. But he dabbled in racing for a bit. Donnie Allison drove for him one year. And another real colorful character, a real tall, thin guy, always wore a big cowboy hat. And I don't know whatever became of the money, but I know that they had a bunch of it, but they went through a bunch of it, too.
Charmin.
Charmin?
Paper.
Really?
Yes.
I'll be darned.
John named his daughter Charmin. They asked him, "Why that?" And he said, "Well, that's where they made all their money."
Amazing.
Yep,
See, I had
that
no
was it.
idea. Well, the things you learn here, huh? This is
And his
awesome.
father crashed his airplane
Yes.
at Indy into a motel room that his girlfriend wasn't there, and he thought she was. They
Holy
broke up or
cow.
something. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he took himself out.
Yeah. And John was a little crazy.
Yeah.
Because I flew up there from Spartanburg and to Valdosta to pick up some stuff. And he had I think it was a Chevelle or something, or my God, never had such a ride. Even Daryl Derringer didn't scare me as bad. I was happy to get the stuff and get and leave.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, he was tall and thin, like you say, and he was an eccentric.
Yeah, he certainly was. When you have that kind of money, you can be eccentric.
Yeah.
We won't even mention what happened this past week, speaking of money and eccentricity, but everybody kind of knows what we're talking about, right? Absolutely. So, I don't know. I just assume be poor and fairly normal. How about you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I know some people that are eccentric that don't get stupid.
Yeah, and there's no law against stupid either.
No, there isn't. Stupid is.
Stupid as stupid does. Well, yeah. If you would, we would love to have you back one day to talk about your offshore racing experiences.
Oh,
and I know that there's still more locked away there that we would love to unearth. This has been fantastic. We covered all different eras and different forms of racing and had some inside stories. And we love that kind of stuff. We are so honored that you chose to be with us today.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here.
How about a big round of applause for Skip McCarthy? It was amazing. Absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much. Yeah. And next week, I'm going to be gone, but we're going to have Roland Villa. If anyone knows Roland, he's a former mayor of Holly Hill, Florida, and part-time race driver, part-time race announcer, general BSer, being a politician, And then his guests are going to be Mr. Dave, Dan Smith. There you go. I know it like I own my own name. Dan Smith and Suzanne Heddy, they are the foremost authorities on the early beach racing. The land speed record runs from 1903 to about 1920. It is amazing. The cast of characters that were here, some of the wacky cars that were here. They had an electric car race on the beach in 1904. Set a world record for an electric car. They had steam cars. They had gas-powered cars. They had grumpy people and nasty people and rich people. And it's just a well of a story. You're really going to enjoy it, so I hope you'll tune in next week. And now we've got to do that final thing here. All right, you can watch us live or view previous shows on our Facebook page, the Legends of Racing Radio Show, or our YouTube channel, the Legends of Racing Radio Show. Yeah, we do this every week to, get that name out there. Or blogtalkradio.com, search Legends of Racing Radio Show, and coming soon, our website, it's going to be called what? But Racing Radio Show. Very good. Thank you so much, Sir Peanut Gallery. We appreciate it. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.
The Legends of Racing Radio Show originates live from the very spot where beach racing began, Racing's North Turn Beach Bar and Grill. Join us next time for the Legends of Racing Radio Show with Buzz McKim.